Good morning everyone, and welcome to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. And today we're going to start working on the second block to this quilt. Now in the last video we worked on the tree block, and this was, I think, pretty simple because it was the same thing over and over again. And once you mastered the technique of making these kind of variated flying geese, then it was just a matter of putting multiples together with some spacers in the trunks, and you had it all. But now we're going to work on the next block. So join us, if you will, and we'll get started on it. Okay, I promised you we're going to start working on the second block. And the second block is the little cars, or I really think they're station wagons, and then they remind me of little woody station wagons, if you know what that is. If you don't know what that is, look it up and you'll see. But they are long station wagons, probably, I would say, mostly in the late 50s, early 60s, mid 60s. And there was a trim down the side of the door panel from front to back that was made out of something that was supposed to look like wood. It could be that they were wood at one time, but most of them were just something fabricated to look that way. So that's what this second block in our quilt design is going to look like it. Now my husband said this looked like a school bus, but it's actually a station wagon. I think it's just because it's such a large block and it's yellow, and when you look at it, that's what you think. But to get started on the second block, we've got to do something we already know how to do. And that is, we have to make a really large tree to go on top of our car or our station wagon. And this is one, it has 8 flying geese hooked together. The one at the top does have this point preserved, and then it's got a spacer on the top and a bigger trunk on this one than what we saw on this one. So I'm not going to cover that in this video because I think we did pretty well in the last one. You should be able to do the same thing and get that. Now let me unpin that, and we'll take that down so you can get a better look at the car here. And we'll just tuck this up. We'll need that in just a minute. But that's the car, and you can see it's got windows, it's the windshield here, and then it's got 2 of the cutest little tires that I've seen. And they are fiddly because they're little pieces, but they do come together pretty easily. What we're going to focus on today is this section right here with the windows and then the pieces that make up the wheel. And depending on time, we may do a little bit more, but I kind of think that's about all we're going to have time for today because our last video was pretty long and I want to keep this one just a little bit shorter. Now, as we run through these blocks, especially the car blocks, each one of the cars is a different color made out of different fabrics. So you're going to see me in the instructional phase of this bouncing back and forth from one color to the other. And that's so I can give you a look of how it goes together, how to put it together, and then what it looks like when it's put together, without taking a tremendously long time to do the actual sewing. The sewing is not hard, but it is time consuming because there are a lot of pieces in this quilt. So here is the window section of the quilt block. And to get this, here's what you're going to need. You're going to need 4 pieces of the fabric for the actual windows. And these are different sizes. You'll need to check your pattern to see which size goes where. And then you're going to need these little supports that are being made from the color of the body of the car, not the trim, the body. And they're going to go together like this. Now there's one other thing that I want to tell you about in today's video as well. Because we're working on the lighter color fabrics and then we're going to work on the wheels, we're going to use two different kinds of thread. And in what I've done so far to get this one finished and prepare for what we're going to do today, I've had to bounce between these two colors because I was doing a little bit of this in the dark thread and a little bit of this in the lighter thread. For you, if you're working this, I would advise you to work with one color and then move to another. And probably in that regard, I would work with the black fabric and the black thread first, get all finished with it, and then go back to the lighter color thread or the color match thread for the car you're working on. I think that'll make it easier. But for our demonstration today, we're just going to start with this one. So I've got a white thread in the top and I have a white thread in the bottom. You could also use a light gray or something that was color matched to what you were sewing. So we've got these all positioned, and all we're going to do is we're going to sew these together with scant 1/4 inch seams. And if you are new to this, or if it just makes you more comfortable, you can pin these in place. I got to the point where the first ones I was pinning, and as I moved on from that one to the subsequent ones, I stopped pinning because it was slowing me down. Now when we get to some of the other pieces in a while, you'll see you'll need those pins. And we are using our 1/4 inch foot with the guide on the side. And you'll be swapping those out a lot too. If you have a machine where you've got a quick swap like I just did, that won't be much of an issue. But if you've got an older machine where you have to actually unscrew the foot and screw it back in, you may want to look at ways that you can speed that up and make it more efficient for you as well. Okay, we're going to get started and we're going to set our machine for our 1/4 inch. And as we talked about last time, I'm adjusting the location of the needle so that it gives me a scant 1/4 inch seam. And now we're just going to sew. And we're just going to keep going, sewing each trim piece to each window piece. And we can chain stitch those. I'm not backspacing or knotting this at the end, tying it off with my machine, because we're going to move right into the next phase where that seam end is going to get covered. Okay, so those were chain stitched in place. We're just going to trim them now and then put them back in the spot. And what I did earlier today or yesterday, I can't remember, is I flipped that one in the back around the wrong way. So be sure that you don't do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to just start stitching them together the same way. If you wanted to press in between, you could, but I found that this is really easy to press after it's sewn, even with all these seams. So I did not select to do that. And then this will be our last seam. All right, and just like that, we've got that one piece done. And we'll press that, and what I did was I pressed it so that all the pieces folded into the darker fabric here, just so we didn't have any seams showing on the back. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll move on to adding the two other pieces to this, and we'll have this section done. I'll show you while I'm working on it what I'm doing. This is one of the pieces you cut out of the body fabric of the car, not the trim. And we are going to need to draw a line diagonal on this small square. And this is really small. This is 1.5 by 1.5 inch square, so it's tiny. Right sides together, and you're going to pay attention to your diagrams in the book to tell you how these sit, meaning which side of the fabric and how that fold line or sew line is going to come in there. Now for these, I usually do pin them, and I'm going to use a little scrap of fabric to start my seam, because we're coming in there, we're starting to sew off the fabric onto the fabric. It's going to have a tendency for the needle to push that fabric down into the machine, and that's when you start getting bird's nest on the back of your fabric, and it wants to draw it all in and really just make a mess. So if you use that little piece of scrap fabric, and I'm going to sew just slightly to the outside of that line, to the side we're going to fold it over to, and that will make it just a smidgen bigger than not doing that. And I find that it keeps everything looking just a little bit neater. Let's cut that scrap fabric off. Take our pins out, and we're going to trim that to 1/4 inch or somewhere close to that. And instead of running back to the machine again, what we're going to do is we're going to finger press this small little seam, and we're going to pin it in place. And that should be all we need to do. And then we'll press it when we get this section complete. Okay, so there we go. And now we're going to attach this piece we just made to this. And I'm going to pin that edge up there. And then I'm going to check it to make sure it's the right length, and we're all good there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over and sew this way, so I can make sure that all of our previously sewn seams are heading in the right direction when we put this new seam in. And we're changing it back to our 1/4 inch foot. This is what gets confusing. And as you start sewing on this project, you will begin to find ways to make that work for you. For me, what I did was I got a lot of pieces pinned together, and I sat down and I sewed everything with that 1/4 inch seam that I could use the 1/4 inch foot with. And then I put those aside, changed the foot, and did everything that was the diagonal lines. And that seemed to work pretty well. Okay, let's sew. My foot is, there we go. Okay. We can monitor our fabric. Remember, we didn't pin this anywhere but at the very top. We don't want to stretch it, but we do want to keep it straight and neat. And I'm going to line up the ends just to make sure we come out right. think our seam got off there. I'm gonna take it back a little bit because I think it wandered off the seam line. Yes, it did. And just that quickly, it's done. Now I can tell you the next seam is going to be one where we are using a diagonal. So we're going to swap that out again. And let's take a look at what we have. We fold this over. I'm going to pin this down. This is what we have. We only have one more piece to put on it, and it's this one here, which creates the windshield. And I will find that right now. And I think it is still in its little box. And because I have a excuse me, because I have a list of all the pieces here, I can verify that what size I need. And that's the right size. And what needs to happen with it is it needs a diagonal line drawn across it. And we'll do that. I'm going to flip it around because we've got a little edge there that was frayed. And we'll just not use that side. Okay. And then, because we haven't pressed this yet, let's put a couple of pins in it, just so we're holding it wide open. We may need to pull those as we start stitching, but this will help it look neat. And then we're going to place this right here. We want to use this side. No, we want to use this side. Remember, I've got that edge that I'm trying to avoid. I'm going to place it and make sure these seams here are lined up so that it is sitting on there just where we want it. And we're going to put some pins to hold it, keep it from moving around on us. And we're going to stitch right here. Now this is one of those that you're going to use your little scrap of fabric to start it. And I'm going to do that again. And again, we're going to stitch just to the right of the line, which is the part, which is where our trim line would be. If it is easier for you to sew on that line, then by all means do that. Whoops, we got off kilter there. Okay, I think it came against the pin and it wanted to slide over slightly. Okay, we're going to clip off this, take our pins out, and fold it back, and that's the way we want it to look. So we can go ahead and take the extra fabric off here. Now, and we'll just trim that at about 1/4 of an inch. You can use your rotary cutter for this. I find that the scissors work just as easily and probably quicker. And I think I just came across a pen with my scissors, and now my scissors have a little, yeah, my scissors must have a little burr in them now. Okay, we have that piece finished, and here you can see it. This is the one we were using as our example, and then the one we just put together. And it's all done. It looks good. I will tell you, you'll see this where, okay, iron, where the diagonal line comes in a little further, your seam allowance is going to cover that up. So when you come in here and sew the next piece, it'll be right to the edge where you expect it. So now we've got the window section for 2 cars. Now the next section we're going to work on are the wheels. Not this whole section, but just the wheels. And what we start with is we start with a square of our dark gray material, or whatever you chose to use for your hubcaps. And you're going to start with one of those, and you're going to start with the tiniest square in our whole thing here. This is a 1-inch square, so it's really small. And you're going to want to draw a diagonal line on the square. And the way I did that was I just used a colored pencil. These are actually Prismacolor. This is the white pencil, and I sharpened it to a pretty good point. It's not like hurt you like a pen would, but it's a pretty small point. And then we're just going to put this so we can draw a line. And then I hope you can see that. Let's see if we can get it a little closer to the camera. See if you can see that line on that black fabric. It's right there. Okay, if I see on the camera when I review it that you can't see it, I'll try to put a picture in. And then we're going to pin one of those squares in each one of the corners of this piece of gray that's your hubcap. Now, I'll tell you, I put quite a bit of pins in here because you don't want it to spin on you. You don't want it to just shift. You want to make sure that it stays where it needs to be when you sew it. And I'm trying to use pretty fine pins so we can get just the edge there. And this is going to be one of the most finicky parts of this quilt, I think. So far anyway, that's what I've run across. Because it's so tiny, you're having to put 4 pieces into one little piece. And it's challenging. But I did have mine that I've done so far come out pretty well, so that's good. Now, we're sewing a dark gray and a black, so we are going to use a dark thread for this. And I just usually keep both on my machine so I can swap them out pretty easily. I know I've said this before, but this is one of the things that I love about my machine compared to the machines we used to sew on, is that it's just so easy to swap out the thread. And I have a needle threader on here, which makes that go really quick too. So I'm swapping out the top thread and the bobbin, and just that quick, that's done. And we're going to want to stitch on that white line or slightly this side of it. Okay, and we're going to need our little trusty extra piece of fabric. Make sure our machine is set up properly. And we're gonna oh, how did it get a pin underneath it? That's really weird. Okay. Okay. All right, let's start. And you're gonna have to deal with all those pins under there. Okay, one is done. And I'm gonna raise my needle, shift my fabric around, make sure that everything's still straight. It has twisted just a little bit, so we want to make sure we get that corrected. Shaking my head because I think I had one of those pieces fold over on me. Okay, this is going to be the last one. If we can get this in here, we'll be done with it. Like I said, this is the most finicky part because it can go south really easily. And sometimes when it doesn't sew properly, you might find it's just better to start that, if I can get my chair to move, to start that whole piece over again. The good thing is it's a small piece of fabric, so you're not wasting a lot of fabric if you do have to do it again. Okay, let's trim up a little bit. Okay, and then just doing a visual check. It looks like all the seams are in the right places, so let's trim it. At least my scissors are working a little bit better. Okay, so now what you're going to have is you're going to have something that looks like that. And to me, that looks like a medieval crest or shield or something that you would use. But what we're going to do is we're going to fold these pieces out so we get a piece that looks just like this. Now, instead of going to the iron and pressing this, what we're going to do is we're just going to substitute this one that's already made, and we'll save that one for a little later. Now, the other thing that I did is once I got it all pressed, I used my little 2.5-inch square because that was the piece that I had that fit it the best, which it's a really good size for this, and just made sure that it was mostly square. And then we're going to take the next two pieces, and your book will tell you which one that is, and we are going to sew one of on this side. And I find this black is really hard to see. And then we're going to sew another one just like it on the other side. And then that's going to be a 1/4-inch seam. We'll have to swap our feet, but we don't have to swap our thread. And we have that section complete. Now, where do we go from here? I'm going to have to reference my book again because it's been a couple of days since I did this the last time, and I don't want to get the pieces mixed up. We took a little bit of a break so I could get these two pieces together. I thought I already had them, but I didn't. And what we did was we created a piece like this and a piece like this. Now, I will caution you, because when you are putting those little squares on the end and you're drawing your line, make sure that you've got that line oriented correctly, because if you don't and you cut it, not only are you going to have to cut that piece, that little square again, you're going to have to cut the bigger one too. So double check it when you're sewing it to make sure it's right, and then before you cut, check it again. And that's my iron making noises at you. Okay, so we've got this one and we've got this one. The one in the blue fabric is the color of the car, so that's going to go on the top. And I'm just going to pin that on. It was nice when I was doing the yellow car because the fabric was so bright. It was very easy to see. This blue is almost as good. Okay, so we've got that one pinned. We've got an awful lot of strings here. And it looks like we're going to want to tug that just a little bit when we sew, because that other piece wasn't pressed, so it's wanting to draw up. And then we're going to put this one on this way. This is going to be the bottom of the tire, and that's the background fabric. So we're going to pin it on one side, and then pin it on the other side, and see how our fit is. Same thing. We're just going to want to stretch it just a little bit because we haven't pressed it. And again, we've got to change feet. This is why I will tell you that once you are committed to this project, go ahead and sew all of the similar items at the same time. So in other words, sit down and sew all of this. You'll have 12 of these little wheels. Sew them all at the same time so you don't have to do this switching back and forth stuff. It's time consuming, it's not efficient. Now for me showing you how to do that, it's unavoidable. Okay, so since we did not press that other piece, I want to press it before we do our next step, but we are very close to getting this wheel section done. So we'll come back in just a minute. We've got two lines of stitches and we'll be done with that. It's all pressed. I want to show it to you. Here it is. And this is the wheel section. Now you're going to make for each car, you're going to make one like this, and then the other one, this is going to have a different piece here. But basically they're the same, just a different fabric. And again, my iron is talking to you. I apologize for that, but the iron is sitting really close to the camera, and when I leave it for a minute, it just, I think it's recycling and it makes noise, spitting. Okay, so this is going to be this wheel here, the front wheel. So in order to do this, we need to add these two pieces. So that's this and this. Make sure you line up like fabrics. And we're just going to line those up end to end. And then end to end, making sure we've got fabric to like fabric to like fabric. It's going to look crazy if you don't. Okay. there we go. We've got that front wheel now all constructed. We got a lot of extra threads in there. But that's what it looks like. And that section right there is this section right here. That's the front wheel of our car. So today we've covered a little bit about the massive tree that's going to go on top. That's this section here. And that is exactly the same technique that we used in block 1. And then we covered the window section of the car. So everything from this yellow line to this orange line. And we covered how to make the wheels. Now, like I said, the other wheel is going to be the same basic construction, only instead of putting this black piece here for the top of the wheel, you're going to use a body colored fabric on top to make this wheel section. It won't be quite as big, but it's the same techniques. So we've covered a lot of what's going on in here. We've got a few more pieces to add, and then we can put it all together to make this block. But I am going to stop here now. We've covered a lot today, a lot to digest. And if you're sewing along, that'll give you an opportunity to practice these and ask any questions that you may have. And then next week when we come back, we will begin to put all of this together and cover any other techniques that we may need to know. There was one section I noticed when I put this together that was really unclear to me, so I'll try to go in and figure out exactly what that is and give you a reference, like a page number, so that if you are following along in the book, you won't have the same confusion or concerns that I did when I did it, and you'll be looking out for that. Thanks for joining us today. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Bye.